We've got a pretty big panel up here today. So I'd like to introduce myself very briefly and then introduce the rest of the panel and then get right to it. My name's Tim Romero. I've been in Japan about 25 years. In that time, I've started a number of companies, sold a couple, bankrupted a couple, 50-50. That's not too bad as far as startups go. I now teach corporate innovation at NYU. I write on innovation in Japan for Forbes, and I work with TEPCO on their business innovation task force, helping them to bring new technologies to Japan. And I also run a podcast called Disrupting Japan, where we interview Japanese startup founders in English and sort of introduce them to the rest of the world and try to let people know what's really going on in innovation in Japan. So I'd like to introduce the rest of the panel. Starting on my far left, Mr. Oko Davaasuren, Regional Director of Techstars Asia. Now, Oko is an active founder. He's a community builder. He's co-founded and he helps run several startups throughout Asia. And he received a bachelor's degree in finance from Portland State University, then a master's in engineering technology. But after that, he returned to Mongolia, where he received his MBA, and he is leading the charge of innovation and startups there. And so I have no doubt we can learn a great deal from him here. Sitting next to him is Mr. Oscar Kneppers, founder of Rockstart. And Oscar's been a successful serial entrepreneur for quite some time, starting out in internet publishing and launching several cross-media brands from way back in 1998. And always focusing on new media, innovation, and technology. And after selling his first media business, he founded Rockstart in the Netherlands in 2011. And Rockstart has been one of the most influential accelerators in all of Europe. And I'm glad you could join us again here today, Oscar. Next is Mr. Gidi Schmerling, Director of the Media Relations for Tel Aviv Municipality. And he also heads the Digitel project. And thanks to that project, Tel Aviv was nominated for the smartest city in the world at the Smart City Expo, the World Congress in Barcelona. Gidi is also in charge of the Tel Aviv Media Arts field in UNESCO's Creative Cities Network. And in his copious free time, he's also the director of Tel Aviv Global and Tourism. Next to him is Mr. Shan Lu, who's the founding partner and CEO at LeaguerX. Now, LeaguerX is a cross-border technology acceleration and investment platform that was developed by the Research Institute of Shanghai University in Shenzhen and the Leaguer Group. And the Leaguer Group is one of the biggest venture capital firms in China. Now, prior to founding LeaguerX, Sean managed the investment banking division at UPEX, the best performing technology asset trading marketplace in China, and he founded Startup Salad, which is the most active community in China. So I think he's going to have a lot to contribute when we're talking about how to build a startup community from scratch or from the middle. And lastly, a man who needs no introduction because he's been introduced several times already. But I'm going to do it anyway. Masaaki Yoshikawa, he's the director of the Osaka city government. Now, Masaaki is the head of the Osaka Innovation Hub. I'm sure most of you already know that. And the Osaka city government launched this as a networking platform, a startup central for the city of Osaka to lead innovation. And it really has been the center of Osaka innovation since it launched then. They've held over 200 innovation-related events, including the one we're all in right now, and other hackathons, pitch contests, many others. and over 12,000 people have participated in these events. So before we get started, I just want to give a big hand to our panel today. Okay, we're going to be talking about building startup communities, building ecosystems. And before we do this, Oscar, let me just start with you. When you talk about a startup ecosystem, what is it? What does it mean? And why is it something we should care about?
I guess that if you enter a startup community that is working, you don't even notice. It's so well glued together. It doesn't feel like it took any care in doing it. And I guess that the main thing, the main glue is the peer-to-peer coaching, I guess, that people are able and willing to help each other. And for the rest, it's a little bit of money and community events. It is mentoring. It's all that, and access to capital as well. But a startup community is where things thrive very naturally. And we always, when we are discussing startup communities, we've been around for 8 years, and we're considered one of the older ones. And I guess that looking back for like 6 to 8 years, we just are all getting started. And being in a place where you feel there's a place for you as a startup and to take risk and to try stuff and to include other people in that process, that's where I guess my definition of a startup community is.
Okay. Shan, you've started several different communities. What do you think is, why are they important? Or I should say, why do founders think startup community is important? What's important for them?
For me, I think the most important thing for building a community is still the people who is building the communities, who is, I think the right people with the right passion, and they would like to stick together and create something together. And the things that they create will benefit all the other people who join the communities. I think that's the most important factor to build up communities. Again, like for how a community can support the ecosystem. First of all, I am a true believer in communities builders. And then I think if the right people getting together from different backgrounds, contributing different resources, can create something very important and something very big. And these things will be able to help rather the startups or the large corporation and even the governments to come up with new ideas and to make something happen. That is very important.
Oko, you've been involved in startup communities in Asia, in the US. You travel a great deal. What do you think really defines a startup community, and why are they important? Why are we talking about this today?
So all of us, driven by economic incentive, we see that startups and small businesses can be the driving force behind economic growth, right? So every municipal or city or country out there is trying to build that environment to be healthy, to be, like Oscar said, thriving for these individuals to come in and experiment and build these great ventures, right? So what we see is, again, I will follow what we call bolder thesis. Oftentimes these are communities that are a grassroots movement. It's driven by entrepreneurs that come in and help each other and end up creating this beautiful ecosystem where the government participates, the corporations participate, the educational institutions participate, right? And all of it together makes what we call this startup ecosystem. And we see that, great ecosystems really are a launch pad for the next generation of companies that can have huge impact in the society and on the economy.
Now that seems highly aspirational. That seems like that's the end goal. How many times have you seen places build up startup ecosystems like that from scratch?
Surprisingly, a lot. And I think the acceleration of these new communities are happening so much right now, right? We used to only talk about Silicon Valley or London. And now we have Tel Aviv, we have Berlin that's coming up as the next hub in Europe, Southeast Asia, every country you can think of, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, right? Even Japan, we have almost 100 startup weekends happening in Japan, just from Techstars' perspective. So you'd be surprised now how many hubs there are, how many communities there are. They're not the same, but they're everywhere, and they're coming.
Okay. Gidi, coming at it from the more of the government side, when you're talking about the importance of startup communities and the resources that you're pouring into them, what is your objective? What do you see as the importance of startup communities?
You know, there are people who think that those young entrepreneurs, they have their laptop and actually doesn't matter wherever they will be, but it's not true. They are looking mostly for what you mentioned before, the sense of community. It's really important for them. In Tel Aviv, we are a really small city, less than 500,000, and we have in the city 1,500 startups. We are the third after the Silicon Valley, London, and then Tel Aviv. But when we do like a lot of roundtable with those startups, they want us to help them to create this kind of openness and communities. So what we are trying to do, it's not only to give them, you know, tax reduce and so on, but to give them the community, like in hackathon, in conference, in the places. We give them a lot of free of charge places. I saw here, by the way, the lab. This is also the same idea. We took, for example, the library in the city, and we changed it to a place that they can work free of charge. And all this together can create this kind of mix, which make this feel of community.
Well, Masaaki, you and I have talked about this before. So you've been focused on building a startup community here in Osaka for the last several years. So what kind of startup community do you want to see built here, and why is it important to Osaka to have a startup community?
Thank you. The startup community sounds, really one of the community focusing on just startups. But from the government viewpoint, we would like to build a networking infrastructure rather than creating a startups. So you're asking what kind of startups we would like to have in the community, but we would like to have the startups who wants to add value to the society. So the entrepreneur, our definition, is a producer combining the elements in the city. So entrepreneurs can be in startups as well as in major corporation as well. So entrepreneurship is very important. So there is a fact that we have a lot of talents and resources, but staying still in the silos. So that's why we need to break in the silo by giving the opportunities for all players in an ecosystem work together to break in the silo, to interact, to create new values. So I don't care about the kinds of the startups. So Kentaro, 3+ is one of the role models leading the innovation in the inbound tourism. So I would like to have him to show more influence on the followers. That's mine.
Allow me to. Yeah, I understand we have plenty of time, so I would like to elaborate a little bit more. I think I would like to share the stories about building startup sellers as startup communities. I think back 4 years ago when we started, there were only 3 of us. We decided to organize some smaller events, gatherings, so people can learn how to start companies. And until now, we are now in over 60, Startup Seller is now in over 60 cities organizing like 120 or 140 events per year. And then now, after all the calculation, we realized that we have over 2,000 startup projects started in our events, in our hackathons. And those 2,000 projects end up to be 200 startup companies. And a year and a half later, or 2 years later, now I think we incubated over 200 companies. And the 200 companies, after a certain period of time, most companies just die. It's a natural circle. But still, like now, we still have about 20 companies are doing quite well recently. And one of our most successful company is called FaceU. The three founders met in one of our very first hackathons. They started the companies about 3.5 years ago. And 1 week ago, they sold the companies for $300 million to one of the largest unicorn in China. It's a very successful startup companies that we witness and also we help in the past years.
I think you bring up a really good point. And I was going to say, my opinion on, as a founder, my opinion on startup communities has really changed over the last 10 years. So my opinion used to be, give me access to customers and give me access to capital and I'll do the rest. That's all I need. But as the startup community kind of grew up around me in Tokyo over the last 10 or 15 years, I realized that there's tremendous value in being able to discuss ideas with other founders, to learn from other people's experiences. It really, having a community of like-minded entrepreneurs makes everybody better. It raises everybody's game.
Yeah, can I say something? I love the fact that Techstars now adopted Startup Weekend a couple of years ago. I guess that many of the people I know that work in the industry, something like even investing or other ways of contributing to the startup system, are born somewhere in one of the many, many startup weekends. And I haven't experienced the startup salad yet, but I guess it's the same thing. It's like a place where you can tinker and think and show your vulnerability and toy an idea. And I guess it's one of the reasons that the company that I founded is called Rockstart, was that we thought startups are the rock bands in business. And people want to play in rock bands after they've seen other people play on stage and they think, I could do that too, I can be there too. But then you have to have a place where you can do that and try it. Instead of, if you need customers and money, and it's because we're in this funding hype at this moment. It's not a startup hype, it's a funding hype. Like everyone's so focused on funding, and it is about this one first step you have to take. You just do that by bumping into someone you like and you discuss an idea and say, hey, let's try and build this, see if it works. And if we can sell it to 2 people, we might sell it to 2 billion. But it's never about the last part, it's about the first part. And then you build a system where it's an ecosystem or an awareness where it's okay to try and fail and try and fail and try and fail until it just works. And it's chaos until it works. And I guess that's the feeling that you want to have. And that it doesn't surprise me that it takes off so fast, because you need to have 2,000 companies in order to find 200 that you're willing to invest in and to do doing these bigger exits.
Well, in building all of these startup communities in different places around the world, I'm sure looking back, it has not been completely smooth. So let me ask you, Oscar, what was the biggest surprise you had when you were building your ecosystem? What didn't go the way you thought it was going to be?
Well, the funny thing, one thing is recent. So we've always been in the city of Amsterdam, in the city center of Amsterdam. So we've moved from 24 square meters to 3,000 in the heart of the city. And I always said we need to be in the city center where you can feel the heartbeat of the economy of the city, and where people just drive past or cycle past and say, hey, this company was born in this building. Something like that. The magic thing that happens when people... So I grew up close to Eindhoven where Philips was based, and I knew this place called the laboratories of Philips. And I always said to my friends, you know, the cassette that we used was invented in this place, in this in this secretive area. And we always pointed at that building. And you want that to happen in the cities, not outside of the city, but in the cities. And what I found recently is that we moved out of the city of Amsterdam, out of the heart of the city, because we couldn't find space that was still affordable, and it was too close. So we moved to the, it's still close, but it's next to the harbor in the city of Amsterdam. And we saw about 40% of the people moving with us, but a large chunk of people not moving with us. So we figured we're not we might have a startup community, but we're not a co-working space. We have like 6 WeWorks opening up in Amsterdam. And Amsterdam is a small city, mind you. It's like 700,000 people. It's really small. So we figured we're not in the co-working environment. We're in the supporting entrepreneur space, which is different. So I felt that what changed is that you get the real entrepreneurs move with you, and the others, like, they move to all the other space. That was one of the biggest surprises. And the other thing is that...
So, just to be clear, you were surprised, you thought they would stay in the same place, and you were surprised they moved, or the other way?
I just assumed that if we would move, 99% would move with us. And it was just like 2 or 3 kilometers. It's like nothing. And it didn't. And so that was a good thing, because it's the assumption. And we always repeat the mantra. So it's the assumption. It's just an assumption. And we had to find that out for ourselves.
Did they stay involved with the community even after you moved?
Yes, they did, and if you have events, they will be coming back to the events. But if they're not in a fixed space, it's hard to have these these little circles that, like family circles do, that build. So we have to do new stuff and new things. Yeah.
Shan, what about you?
My surprise, right?
Yeah. What was your biggest surprise?
I always like to share this story of myself. Of my own. And then again, also 4 years ago when we started Startup Salad, one of the team that joined our event, hackathon event, and created this company does the outbound travel agency service platforms. And at that time, like, we also, during the event, we invite some of the top VC investors to join the event, and also some of the experienced entrepreneurs to join the event. And everybody at that time, when we first met with the team and the crazy ideas, nobody believed in them. Everybody just say it doesn't work, it will never work, we are not going to invest in you, and you should change your business model to that direction. That was the conversation we had like 4 years ago. And also earlier, actually the end of last year, about November, this company raised $120 million US. And then it's on its way to become a unicorn in Asia. So that would be my biggest surprise. And I have to say, like, nowadays when even I just became an investor myself. I realized that no matter how much experience I have, it's difficult for me to just judge a company or on its business model, whether it's going to work or not. I don't believe in that. So I think the best way to do it is just wait and see what these people can create.
It really is hard to know whether you're looking at a bad idea or if you're looking at a good idea that you just don't understand.
One of the things I like is that people think of a startup as a small company as opposed to a large company. Many people as opposed to a few people. But it's, I think I told you this before, but a startup is just a small experiment with people involved taking big risks in order to find a sustainable business model. And that's it. It's a small experiment in which you take big risks. And it's not just a small company that needs to be big and big and big. It's just this tinkering, this stage, at least in a community sense, what we're talking about now, is that you have a place where you can do that. And it might turn out really big. And the good thing about Chinese markets is you have volume. That's one thing that we're jealous of, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. Oko, what surprised you?
So going back to your question, I think I was really fortunate to be able to build community in Mongolia and Malaysia, Singapore, partly through Techstars in US, and now Vietnam. So a surprising thing, and it's a positive surprise, was that communities can be built anywhere. Language doesn't matter. Culture doesn't matter. Who starts it doesn't matter. Each ecosystem has a different leader and then different feeders at some point. But if they do it right, eventual picture of what we're imagining is always the same. Entrepreneurs are same everywhere. They might be speaking different languages, but they're all seeing some great arbitrage opportunity between supply and demand. They came up with some awesome technology, and they're willing to go really hard to build it and make it happen, right? So in that scenario, the biggest surprise was, and people always, this is my biggest problem with people when they say, oh no, Oko, you don't understand this culture. We are different here. It's not gonna work here. And now we've seen it enough. Techstars has been around for 12 years now. Startup Weekend has been around for 10 years. We know this kind of simple model can help any communities anywhere around the world build thriving ecosystems, period. We're in Myanmar as of our latest country, and I'm really hoping to bring our programs to North Korea end of this year. So.
We're actually opening up in Myanmar as well with Rockstart Impact. And the thing is, the good thing about Startup Weekend, that's why I like it so much, there's no money involved. People are volunteering to build an ecosystem, and they are part of that family. And it's not about money. It's about the willingness to start sharing what you know with people that are willing to do the same thing.
Gidi, you've come at it from the other angle, from the government trying to support startups and create an ecosystem. So what was the most surprising thing for you?
I think first we also have the same phenomenon as in Amsterdam. We also, in the past, we try to find very maybe cheap places, not in the city center, but in the neighborhood that those startups could work at and even give it to free, but they don't want. They want to be in the city center, even that sometimes it's much more expensive. So you can see them even like in cafe or in the boulevard walking outside because the weather is really great in Tel Aviv. But they feel that if they won't be in the city center, if they won't go, I don't know, even in the evening to a bar and meet other friends from this scene, from the startup scene, they won't have enough aspiration, connection, knowledge, and so on. So most of the startups, even today in Tel Aviv, they want to be only in the city center.
Is that because is that because they're more likely to run into other startup founders, or just because it's all young people think it's cool to live in the city center?
Both. I mean, they want to go out and to find their friend, to find other young and artists and other communities which make them that kind of aspiration. And when we're asking even some company, you know, even Facebook in Tel Aviv open now a huge branch in Tel Aviv, they built it in the middle of the city, in the most expensive place. And we asked them and other company, why you are paying so much to be in one street in the city, it's called Orchard Boulevard, in the city center, in the most expensive place in Tel Aviv. You can rent a place like 10 minutes in a bus, and it will be like half price. And tell, no, we can't recruit new workers if we are not in the city center. We must be in the city center. And when you go outside, you can see this scene. It's really amazing to see that. You know, you go to the beach and you see people with the laptop working, or in the street in the city. And now, what we are doing now, we are trying to change the table in the main boulevard of the city to like a startup table, we call that, and you can connect to the Wi-Fi and just work together, just outside, free of charge, of course.
Masaki, what about you? What surprised you about Osaka over the last few years?
Yes. I think we're focusing on giving the flexibility and connectivity and diversity to the ecosystem or networking infrastructure. That is, I think, the key features we need to input to the infrastructure. And then I've been providing events like hackathons. And when I had first hackathons with the big companies like Sharp, and I got a kind of a question, why we, Osaka City government, support big companies? because local government has been conventionally supporting only SMEs, but doesn't care about big companies. But from viewpoint of ecosystem or kind of power of the city itself, we need to have those every player to get together to create something. So, and also Japan has a very good strength in the major companies. They have a lot of good talented people and resources of the wisdom or skills or know-how to sell the product or service. And then another thing is that universities itself. But speaking back again, the little bit negative, not negative, but surprise to me is supporting big companies is one of the things that conventional people in the government is criticizing. So I think we are calling this movement working together beyond all boundaries, such as position, title, organization, area, nationality. This is called HackOsaka. This is the name of the conference, but this is idea. Let's start work together beyond all organizations. So our government, Osaka City government, is addressing that, supporting all members in the ecosystems. So I don't want to be, or anybody wants to become or be surprised at the working together with big companies and universities and every players. That's one of, yeah.
Excellent. The thing I found the most surprising, I mean, I've never built a startup community. I guess Disrupting Japan is a small one, but the biggest surprise I found in the development of the startup community in Tokyo is when any foreigner first comes to Japan, we're told of the importance of Japanese culture and of protocol. And the biggest surprise, and it took me far longer to learn this than it really should have, it goes to what Oko is saying, that culture doesn't matter. So in 1998, when I was starting my first e-commerce company, the department stores and everyone was saying, no, Japanese will never buy things online. They need to hold them and touch them. It'll never take off here. And of course it did. And the same thing happened with mobile shopping. Well, women will never buy clothes online with the Yahoo auctions. No, Japanese will never buy used things. And what we're seeing now, what we've seen over the last 5 years especially, is 20, 30 years ago, it would have been unthinkable that so many Japanese would be starting companies. It was just, everyone would have told you it's not part of the culture. But I think what's happened in every case, just the risks and the rewards have changed. It's become easier to start a company. It's become less risky. It's become more rewarding. Joining big companies has become more risky and less rewarding. And so I think that when we see risks and rewards change, we see culture change very fast. And that's really been my biggest surprise in this. But where we are now, I want to ask, and this is something I want to ask from the point of view of the government's opinions first. So I think Japan especially has been making tremendous efforts to support entrepreneurship and to promote entrepreneurship. And I'd like to ask, Masaaki, what types of programs should governments be doing? What can governments do effectively? And what kind of things are governments doing that maybe they shouldn't be doing?
Difficult question, but in a way, the things we have been focusing on is the pitch contest here, because Osaka is a kind of a hub in the Kansai region, so where we can attract easily from people from Kyoto and Kobe and area within 30 minutes. So I think this is a suitable place for the market, entrepreneurial market. So we would like to position the Osaka is a entrepreneurial market first. So the pitch contest is one of the things that we have focusing on. And second is that as government, as a government is a good, is a convener. It's a convener, all the staffs or the resources, but can convene all elements, even in the competitors in the market. So we have a good position to attract the power in the platforms, but it's not a leader of the ecosystem because government business cycle is too short to run the ecosystem. So that's why what we are challenging now is to letting the private sector do the similar things like acceleration programs. And the other thing is that I think the subsidizing to the private sector who is going to hold a co-working space and also the kind of large space for open innovation areas. And then also we are going to bid or invite World Expo 2025. This is a kind of a symbolic project to let the people think about open innovation. So Expo 2025 is going to have open innovation outdoor laboratory or living lab. So that's why the good things. So these are the things we are doing right now. And then, however, so speaking back to your questions, what things that is not effective is that kind of the things that we do as if we were a leader of the network infrastructure or a kind of events, because our term is very short.
Okay, excellent. Gidi, what are your thoughts? What do you think government should be doing and what should they not be doing?
Okay, I think first there is no kind of secret recipe for this kind of success. And actually in Tel Aviv, most of the phenomenon, it's like bottom up. I mean, it's not coming for the government. What we are doing like kind of a round table and try to understand what are the obstacles or what do they want us to do. So we are doing like kind of open data because they need a lot of information. We do Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi all over the city because they need a place to work, some kind of outdoors for the people in Tel Aviv, so we do it. There are tax reduce for the early stage and so on. But what I think most important, as we see it as a very important point, it's this kind of mixed uses. I mean, what we are trying to do in Tel Aviv, it's that we don't have a separate area, for example, for the academy or industrial zone or artist quarter and so on. What we are trying to do that all of them will be together in the same place. I mean, the people that are working in the hospital and the teacher and the academy, they all live together in the same place in mixed uses. It means in the same place, you go to school, your walk is like 10-minute walk, and at night you go to the bar, and you're always meeting other communities because we believe that this is really important, this kind of variety of population, a lot of minority that live together. This is the best field for the startup to have kind of aspiration and to get an ideas, because most of the startup they are trying to find problem and to solve them, and we give them the aspiration to contact other community that they would never meet. We believe that if the startup community we live, you meet only people from the startup and not other kind of people, you won't have enough aspiration to solve problem that you don't know. For example, in Tel Aviv, it's really popular, the med tech in Tel Aviv, because of this good interaction between the doctor and the medicine field and the startup, same as artists and other fields.
Yeah, I made me think. We have, so the Netherlands is really small, 18 million people altogether, but we have a king. And one of the good things that we have installed is a special startup envoy, which happens to be the brother of the king, a prince, Prince Constantine. And the good thing is that he's super accessible. So although he is part of the royal family, which we in some way take seriously, although the Dutch don't take anything too seriously, but anyway, I can call him up and say, we have this problem that we just don't understand with, let's say, a specific texting. And he's not going to solve it for us, but he at least is going to help us find the right people to talk to. And if he does the introduction, we'll be at the table. So that's one good thing. What a government can do is a special envoy. And in our case, it happens to be a prince, but it could be anyone. And it was, before the prince, it was someone who came from the European Commission. So that's one really good thing.
So it's just a way that small startup companies can have their ideas bubble up to the top very quickly.
Yeah, so I agree. A community, you build a community bottom up, but you need help at the top for some things to just being dealt with. And like large corporations should have a startup officer. You can have startup officers in different governmental institutions where they at least have a desk that they can talk to someone or find someone. And then another thing that one of the city of Amsterdam started doing is look at what startup accelerators like we all do have done, and look at the market and say, okay, we have a couple of challenges as a city of Amsterdam, and we invite startups from around the globe to address the challenges, and we host them like we do, as accelerators do, and they don't invest in them, but they are a launching customer, because some do like smart lighting or smart sensing on the streets, etc. And it's a great way to get involved. So it's fairly easy. You don't have to mimic everything that startup communities or private sector communities do, but some things are really relevant. So a startup officer, a startup envoy, someone who has access to governmental people and can change things. And one of the things that in the Netherlands changed very fast was they asked us, what is one of your biggest problems? And we found that we invited companies to come to the Netherlands for 3 months in our accelerator program, and then just a couple of days before demo day, they had to leave the country because they didn't have a visa. So people from, for instance, we had a great company from Brazil, and they couldn't pitch for investors because they had to leave the country. So we said one of our biggest problems is a visa for our startups. And together with Startup Bootcamp, our colleagues in the Netherlands and some others, we did, I think it took us like 8 months to completely have a new signature under the startup visa, which now you can take a year in order to prove that you have the time to build a startup, etc., when you're from abroad.
Excellent. Shan?
I'm from Shenzhen. Shenzhen is a very unique city because most of the government policy experiment is texted in Shenzhen before open up to other places in China. And I think two of the things that the government did very efficient. One is to simplify the business registration for private business owners. And nowadays that we can register companies, we will get the registration done by just 1 week. We will get the business registration done. And previously, we have to go to different government agency to get a stamp, and then to be able to register a company. Now we just go to one agent, and then to apply the applications online, and then get the business license within 1 week. And also the second thing that the government did is to lower the cost, and we reduce the tax for the small business owners and the small private business. And now there's another initiative happening in Shenzhen. It's called Qianhai, Special Economic Zone. And then now we reduce the business tax down to 15%, which is lower than Hong Kong and lower than most of the other countries. So
Free zone?
a free zone,
Yeah.
yes, a free trading zone. And then these two things, I think it's motivating people to start their own business very fast.
Oko, I know you've worked with quite a few governments. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so firstly, I think it's now a time where I see that governments wanting to be helpful in community building, and governments are very open to sharing their experiences with each other. So what we're seeing is a lot of government people from this country traveling there, because every country out there is experimenting with some cool ideas, including the free zone. I'll say two specific things here for diversity. I think number one, really effective governments plays as an amplifier for the champions, for the stories, for the grassroots movements that's going on, because they have that ability to rally up all the news and press in the country behind them to tell the story. And that's really what's motivating when you're just starting to build a community. You need that first generation stories to be told to build the second and third generation. The other thing that seems to be happening in Southeast Asia really well, and specifically also in Korea and Singapore, is what you're doing, which is government is rallying up the traditional corporations to be active players and feeders into the ecosystem and community. Eventually, these guys gonna be the ones who are gonna be putting in tons of resources and bring in a huge momentum. And oftentimes, the grassroots, two guys in the coffee shop will not necessarily gonna be able to move sharp like that. But it is the government who says, hey, we're with these guys, there's a big benefit, we vouch, and let's work together. It's that role that government seems to be playing really well in Singapore and Korea, and seems to be happening in Japan as well.
That's excellent. There's some really amazing points. I think the only thing I would add, and it's specific to Japan, I agree with Masaaki that the one thing the government should not do is try to lead. It needs to be the startup founders, the entrepreneurs leading the movement. But I think the most important thing that the government has done so far, it has been, there's the startup programs, events like this are wonderful and they're supportive, but I think perhaps the most important thing is that having mayors and governors and even Prime Minister Abe get out in front of television cameras and say, startups are the future of Japan. This is the source of innovation. We need to understand this, has had a legitimizing effect on startups that has been unbelievable. So when I started my first company back in 98, if I wanted to work with a large Japanese company, I would be pushed down through like 4 levels of subcontractors, because big companies just didn't work with little companies like mine. They just didn't. And now that's all changed. Every large and medium-sized company in Japan is saying, what's going on with this startup stuff? We need to understand it. We need to connect with this. And I think that attitude change is primarily driven by government shining a spotlight on it and saying this is important. So I think they need to keep doing that. And
That's good. Yes, I need to have their mayors coming in and to shout out.
it is so important in Japan.
Very important. But we had the mayors come 2 years ago. But anyway,
And it helps.
helps.
But I'd say the one thing I'd love to see Japan do in the future, and the one thing a lot of the startups on my show that have received government grants say, much more than government grants, they want the ability to bid on government contracts. The government needs to have a program, kind of like the US DARPA program, where startups can bid on small projects, where they have a chance to prove themselves against Mitsubishi and Marubeni. I think that would be the next amazing step for the Japanese government to take.
Yes. One thing that I would like to add is that one of the major problems the entrepreneurs are facing, or startups facing, is they are core human resources. Can take major roles like a CFO or a CMO or even a CEO. So I have been telling the major corporation to get such kind of people borrowed from the major corporations, because this kind of opportunities will be a very good educational projects for the employees of the major corporations. So I'm telling those major corporations.
Fantastic. Okay, the last question I want to ask in the grand tradition of panel discussions and keynote speeches, you fly to somewhere across the world and are asked to give advice about a place you've only just arrived in. So with that in mind, I want to ask, what is the best advice you have to give to the Osaka startup community right now? Oko, do you want to start us?
Sure. So like I said earlier, a beautiful thing about these, what we call startup communities and startup ecosystem is it's so open. It is the shared value among communities, among ecosystems is that we help each other. We support each other. We're always open to share our experience of what worked, what didn't work. And what I'm noticing, which is sort of a weakness here that I've noticed, is that Japanese tend to stay in Japan. There's a lot of amazing things happening here, but the rest of the world does not hear about it as much or don't get to collaborate as much. And oftentimes it's a language barrier, but it's also very fixable. So I would say reach out, talk to other communities. We're here, we're always open. We want to come and work together. And I know everybody feels that same way. So just, collaborate more, be open a little bit more.
Excellent. Oscar?
One of the things that I learned is in the Netherlands when this Envoy started, every city was competing with Amsterdam. Amsterdam is attracting all the attention, and everyone wanted to move to Amsterdam, and everyone started competing with other cities for tech companies. So what the government helped with is to look at the map of the Netherlands. I said Amsterdam almost. But anyway, to look at the map of the country and then say, okay, we have defined like 13 different regions that have a distinct personality and character and speciality in what they do. So it's security or hardware, high tech, creativity, finance, shipping, trading, and all that, and help the cities define their identity. Because they have roots, they have traditions that they are really good at. I believe textile is one of the things that is in one of the closed cities here, and for instance, like that. So if you help them focus on that, on specific areas, you stop competing for this one tech unicorn that everyone wants to have. It is invest in, let's say, the verticals that you're really good at. That would be one thing. And in Osaka, I'm not aware, having been here for the second time, but now for 36 hours, I don't know what it is exactly, but to focus on those specifics that really color this region and collaborate with other cities, do more or less the same thing, because in the distinction and the differences, you might stand out better than to do every tech startup, every unicorn that
So to
everyone's
find
working
their
on.
strength.
Find your strength and communicate that and help the government in doing that for the other regions as well.
Okay. Gidi?
The potential of Osaka, it's huge, it's amazing. And I think that because there are a lot of you see the education system and you see there are big company here that it's also very, very important, and this kind of interaction could be great. I think what it's really important to create first a community, and I saw that here in the lab near us, that it's great ideas and seem amazing. And also I think what's going to be really important is to do more like kind of exchange, or even to bring here some a company or startup from other country to residency, or to even to 1 year, to maybe exchange, just to create more interaction between the market here that is still small and the other company, to have interaction and aspiration from each other.
When I give talks in China, every time my advice will be just the same. It's just go out because we have been dealing with many startups, and most of the time when the startup founder says that I'm the only person building the only product with the only technology, it's not true. You will never be the only person building the only products. You need to go out there, you need to go out of your home country to other market to see if somebody else is building something similar like yours. I think that is very important. And also this time in Japan, I think for most Japanese company, another advice that I would give is that I think the business culture here, there are goods and bads. Good, it's we do a lot of preparations. The Japanese companies always does many preparations before they make decision to move on for the next move. But I have to say, like nowadays in the ecosystem, in the innovation ecosystem, we cannot wait that long. You have to move fast and you have to decide fast. So that would be my advice to the Japanese startups or companies.
Excellent. Masaaki, you're our Osaka expert.
Thank you very much for the kinds of advices, and then appreciate it, really appreciate it, and you have points. And also, because probably the foreign people is looking at the Osaka from outside, we could get the kind of our opportunities and strength. And so that's why we have been focusing on connecting with the global communities like them. So get in the ring in Netherlands and Tel Aviv City in Israel and the LeaguerX in Shenzhen, with which we have just concluded signing MOU today, and very proud of this kind of things. So I think that getting our people exposed to the global arena or global society may be a stimulus to us, stimulating to us. So anyway, I would like to get all of you exposed to the other global communities. So that is in a way what is called HackOsaka.
I think the advice I have is to the Osaka entrepreneurs in particular. And the very first time I came to HackOsaka 4 years ago, 5 years ago maybe, I remember I was talking to two startup founders, or two individuals who were planning on starting a company. And they were saying that this is a great event, there should really be more events like this, there should be more of a community. And I said, you guys should do that. And they said, yeah, someone should really do that. And I thought, okay, maybe my Japanese isn't that good. I said, no, you two you're in a building with hundreds of people who want to talk about startups. You should get phone numbers and build a community. And they said, yeah, someone should do that. And it's like, no, seriously, you two, get Meishi, buy some beer and pizza. And they're like, yeah, that's a good idea. But I know they didn't do it. And even last week, when I was coming down here, so Kyoto is much smaller than Osaka. But when the Kyoto startup community found out that I was going to be in Osaka, I had 3 invitations to go to Kyoto and grab some beers with the startup community. They were introducing Kyoto startups back and forth to get on Disrupting Japan. So even though they're a tiny community, they're involved. And I think what Masaaki said before is that it's so important. The government can't lead. The government can support. They can shine a spotlight on whatever it is you're doing. But for Osaka to really shine as a startup community, it requires the startups and the people who want to start up to step into that spotlight. And that's the best advice I can give right now to Osaka. But I want to thank you all for inviting us, and I want to thank our panel today. So let's give them a big round of applause. And thank you so much.